Hey guys, welcome back to another League discussion video, and today is going to be kind of a rant. Mind you, it's a scripted rant, so it's going to be a bit less of me taking a neutral stance on a topic and more just speaking freely about my opinions on the game. So if you're wondering why I might sound a bit heated in the video, just a forewarning. It's now been over a year since I started making League videos on a regular basis, and the overarching narrative I have in I would say a good half of them is based on champion design. The problem with new champions, what makes a well-designed champion, which champions have the best reworks, confusing champion design, the best and worst designed champions, are champions too overloaded, does League have too many champions, so on and so forth. Today's video is going to be a follow-up to the problem with new champions I made in November, where I criticized the direction Riot took with their new champions and how they've strayed away from their original path just to make the most marketable or montage hype releases they can think of. Looking back, I could have definitely spent more time on that video since my judgments, especially in the lore part, were premature, but for the design portion, I still stand by it. 4 new champions have been released since that video. I think Rel is a pretty solid champion in terms of design, and I'm excited to see what they're gonna do with her lore since I believe her power directly beats Mordekaiser, which is interesting. But I wanted to talk about the other 3, Viego, Gwen, and Akshan. I have many things to talk about, but I want to look through them in terms of more specifically their abilities. While it's been going on for a long time, these 3 champions have all but cemented Riot doubling down on their champion design direction. The notion that they tried to stuff so many often superfluous things onto a champion just to incentivize players to abandon their current mains and play with them. With that in mind, I need to explain something about ability properties. A common defense people make in favor of the massive conditions and attributes and extra things these new champions have is that they have lower numbers. Like Gwen's passive requires 125 bonus AP to increase the percent health magic damage by 1%, and it only has a base value of 1. Whereas someone like Fiora needs only 19 bonus AD to increase her percent max health true damage by 1% while having a base of 3. But you can't compare those two because Fiora can only apply that passive true damage through hitting vitals, whereas all of Gwen's damage, whether basic attacks or abilities, can apply 1000 cuts. Dr. Mundo was a prime example of this. His ultimate was an absurd 110% max health regeneration, his E gave him up to 260 bonus attack damage, 39 bonus magic resist, and his Q did 30% current health damage on a 4-second cooldown. If you applied the high numbers low numbers logic on him, Dr. Mundo would have been the most broken champion in the game. But no, he was actually one of the worst. In fact, when he got reworked, his new passive was so good that Riot completely took away his bonus magic resist and cut his bonus stats and healing by over half. Because if you compare Adrenaline Rush with Mundo Goes Where He Pleases, the latter is so much better for a wide variety of circumstances. It's not the value of an attribute or an ability property that can make it problematic, rather the fact that it exists in the first place. Not all attributes and game elements are created equally. Giving one champion a stun may not always have a comparable level of impact as giving another champion a dash or on-target ability or stealth. Regardless of how strong that property can be, if it exists, there is inherent value in it that supersedes not having it. Wukong's Cyclone reworked to be activated twice, giving him 2 knockups for a quarter of a second each compared to before, where it was 1 knockup for I believe 1 second. You would think this is a nerf since he lost half a second of total hard CC time, but it was a buff. Now that he has 2 Cyclone activations, he has 2 chances to disrupt enemy attacks. He can cancel channels and stop dashes twice. Even if the Cyclone knockup was for 1 frame, it would still be better than his old one because it's 2 separate displacements. Another easy way to look at this is through observing the application of damage. Let's compare Pantheon with Vayne. Pantheon is well known for having an incredibly strong early game. He has high damage, targeted invincibility, a semi-global ultimate, and a point-and-click stun attached to a dash. Part of why he's strong is because of his high early game damage. Comet Spear at max rank has a base damage value of 190, which, doesn't seem like all that much, but his bonus AD ratio is 115%, very high. Pair this up with his Mortal Will empowered version and the damage goes to 350 base by level 12 and another 115% bonus AD. So you're taking a whopping 350 plus 230% bonus AD physical damage. That hurts. The Shield Slam from his Aegis Assault does 255 plus 150% bonus AD. So this guy hits like a truck. And honestly, judging by the size of his quads, he can probably squat one too. But as time goes on, he falls off because the only thing that gets better in his kit is flat damage. In contrast, Vayne's kit looks rather underwhelming if we look purely at her parameters. Aside from Condemn, the rest of her abilities lack any meaningful utility. But what makes her such a late game demon is how ridiculously she scales. Remember, the only thing that scales about Pantheon is his damage. His stun doesn't get longer, his invincibility duration doesn't get longer, his ultimate doesn't get longer or faster. Building damage on Vayne makes her auto attacks inflict more damage. but she also attacks faster so she can get more hits in per second, which means more instances of that increased attack power. On top of that, the faster she attacks, the more times she can proc silver bolts, and on top of that, the more times she attacks, the more frequently she can land critical hits if she's not at 100%. And of course, as she reaches the mid to late game, her tumble cooldown decreases, which means she can enter stealth many more times with her ultimate than in the early game. The reason late game champions scale so well is because the attributes not only increase in power, but in frequency, in applications, and/or in proportions. So with that being said, let's go through Viego, Akshan, and Gwen. Once again, if it wasn't clear from my long explanation up until now, we're not factoring the numbers of these attributes, but whether they have it at all to begin with. What is within Viego's kit? His passive allows him to literally transform into enemy champions and assimilate their basic abilities. The number of implications and interactions that come with that are pretty obvious. Viego effectively has access to at least 18 basic abilities in each game compared to the average champion's 3. He has bonus on-hit % current health physical damage, a double attack that heals him, a dash with a stun on it that also functions as an auto attack reset, a massive area field that gives camouflage, bonus attack and movement speed, and a free targeted blink that gives him displacement immunity that also acts as a finisher on the lowest health enemy champion while knocking away other champions. And he gets a free cast of it whenever he transforms into an enemy champion with this passive. So basically, it's a Darius ult that doesn't require you to actually land a killing blow to get the reset. Thanks to Viego's double hit passive, a single usage of his Q, W, and ultimate allows him to proc on-hit effects 6 times in quick succession, and his max charge stun lasts a second and a quarter, long enough to use all of his attacks during that time. What's in Gwen's kit? She permanently deals bonus % health magic damage, which heals her based on 70% of the damage dealt towards champions. She has a large attack in a cone that can hit up to 6 times, so she applies her passive 6 times and it does true damage at the center. She has a buff that gives her bonus armor and magic resist, which scales with her ability power, which means she gets tankier by building damage, and is untargetable to all enemies outside of the friend zone. The buff lasts for 5 seconds. She has a dash with a cooldown refund that gives her bonus attack speed and bonus magic damage on hit. And her ultimate is a long-range piercing projectile that slows enemies and can be used 3 times, with each one increasing in the number of attacks. Even though Gwen's passive has one of the lowest AP ratios I've seen, just by attacking you 4 times, using a max stacks Q, and her ultimate along with the extra 2 basic attacks she needs to use in between each ultimate cast to refresh it, she can apply 1000 cuts 21 times. If you thought it was crazy for Viego to land his passive proc 6 times in 2 seconds, Gwen can hit you 21 times in like 3 or 4 seconds. That means, with 480 ability power, she has enough % max health damage to kill you with just her passive, let alone all the other damage from her abilities, her attacks, the massive armor and magic resist, her on-target ability, her bonus attack speed steroid, her life drain, her dash that has a cooldown refund, yada yada yada. Last champion, Akshan. Okay, so Scooch made a video about this, which actually prompted me to make this video as an indirect response, almost in agreement with him. Now initially I thought he wasn't all that bad in terms of just like looking at the trailer, but then I saw his attributes. His passive makes him strike twice with every attack. That's a permanently active Lucian passive. Hitting an enemy 3 times deals bonus magic damage and gives him a big shield. So that's Mini Nar's W and I guess Shen's passive. He can choose to cancel the second auto attack to instead gain a massive boost of movement speed, which is sort of like Sivir's passive. So if I'm hearing this correctly, his one passive is the passives of 4 champions put together. Yeah. His Q is a long-range projectile that extends its range when it hits an enemy and reveals all enemies hit. So he can throw this at an Akali, boom, he can see her. And if it hits champion, he gets bonus movement speed. So we have Sivir's Q with a little bit of Seraphine's ultimate and Lee Sin's Q vision. His W, if we just exclude the revive passive aside, it's literally just Viego's Harrowed Path but better. He gets bonus movement speed, bonus mana regeneration, he gets a directional indication of enemy champions that took down his teammates, and when he's near walls, it lasts forever. The main caveat of Viego's camouflage was that it gave away his location since we could see the giant glob of mist. Akshan's passive can last indefinitely as long as he's near walls, and you have zero indication of where he is. That's Kha'Zix's old perma-stealth all over again. His E is a really long hookshot that causes him to rapidly attack nearby enemies and apply on-hit effects each time and lifesteal at 100%. Oh, and the damage scales with his attack speed. And it resets upon takedowns. Why does every attack need to have a reset now? Like seriously, I remember back in the day, Darius' ultimate was so scary because it had a reset. But now we're just giving resets to everybody. Samira dash reset, Viego's ult resets, Akshan's hookshot resets, Qiyana's Q resets, Pyke's ult resets, Gwen's E refunds half his cooldown just by hitting something. What is the point of ability haste or cooldown reduction when every champion just has ability resets and cooldown refunds? Oh, and did I mention, his ultimate is a finisher, so we're also giving everyone finishers too. Everyone needs to have an execute now. Oh, and the ultimate applies his passive, so he gets shield and bonus damage and everything like that. Yes, I sound tilted because I am tilted. What I find really frustrating about Riot's design philosophy is that they went out of their way to remove instant cast point and click abilities, right? Like, if you look at all the new champions, very few of them have point and click. Gwen, no point and click attacks, Viego, none, Rel, none, Seraphine, none, Samira's dash, and auto attack passive CC extension thingamadoohickey. Okay, she has 2, but they're both really small. Yone, none, Lilia, none, and you can't say her ultimate is point and click because she has to land another ability first. Set. Now we get to someone with a major point and click ability, his ultimate. I think you get the point. A lot of super impactful abilities like Seraphine ult, Yone's ultimate, Samira's ultimate tend to be locked down behind either a condition or a long casting animation compared to the old champions like Annie and Amumu, which came out very fast. They're not instant nor are they point and click, so players have to actually aim their attacks and it gives enemies quote unquote more counterplay. However, you add so many ways to invalidate that counterplay that it beggars belief if you were genuinely trying to make champions more fair to play against. The best way to counter skirmishers is to kite them out since they're all melee and usually single target. But then you have Gwen, who essentially becomes invincible to all ranged attacks and she has as much area coverage in her kit as a juggernaut. The key weakness of enchanters is that they can be easily destroyed if you miss position on them. But then you have Yuumi, an enchanter who can go untargetable indefinitely. Like, what? You can't legitimately make a case that you want champions to feel like they have counterplay but then add counterplay to that counterplay. The champion design team can't seem to wrap their head around the fact that a new release does not need to have 40 billion things in their kit to be interesting. Set is a fine example. Does he have bullshit? Yes, but he's a super simple champion with a very enjoyable and novel take on the Juggernaut subclass. His passive, he punches twice. His Q, he punches twice really hard. His W turns his damage into a shield with a giant counterpunch. His E is a pull that stuns if it hits both sides, and his ultimate footballs the target into the team for big damage. That's it. All things considered, he was one of the more mild champions Riot made in the past few years. The reason people love the Fiddlesticks rework so much is because he's a testament to how you can have a multi-dimensional, powerful, and enjoyable champion without putting inordinate amounts of extra fluff into their kit. What's even funnier is that most of that extra fluff ends up getting removed anyway. Sylas lost a shield on his E and missing health scaling on his W, Samira lost her ability to dash through allies, Yone lost a lifesteal scaling on his ultimate, Irelia lost her bonus shield damage and disarming, Akali lost half her kit. That's because not every champion needs to have a heal, not every champion needs to have an execute, not every champion needs a shield or stealth or on-target ability. A few videos back I just talked about the overabundance of healing and how it makes classes feel less distinct from each other. Why bother playing someone like Nasus when you can pick a skirmisher that also drain tanks like Gwen? The only reason I can think of for Riot to keep repeating this design process over and over is because of profit. These new champions have to be so much cooler, so much fancier, and so much better than old ones, otherwise players will never buy the champion and their skins. And yes, I'm one of the few people who support the conspiracy theory that every new champion Riot releases looks like an anime character. No, seriously, Akshan, Viego, Yone, Set, look at them 6-packs! But I digress. This is the same problem that happens with other games. Pokemon has been trying to do this way too much, starting with Mega Evolutions, which were okay, then they brought Z-moves, which were bad, and then Dynamax and Gigantamax, which were worse. Gacha games have been doing this for years, where you have to pull all the new units because they had unique mechanics that no other units that came before them would have, and you needed those new mechanics to win against late game bosses. Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually, you know what? I'll let Scooch take care of this again because this guy explains things in a more funnier way than I do.
Now check this out. This is what power creep is. And it happens in every single game that is around for a long time. This it makes no sense to me either, but I'm gonna read it for the sake of my point. This card gains 500 attack for each dragon-type monster your opponent controls. Now let's read this guy. Fusion, Synchro, and XYZ monsters your opponent controls cannot activate their effects once per turn when your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand. I don't know what that means either. But what I'm saying is we can all tell very easily that this card right here is haha fun. Oh, okay, so I get more dragon type and then he's strong? Okay, then I get dragon type monster. This card over here, what the did I even read, bro?
Releasing champions with new gimmicks is not something new. It's been happening since the game came out, but their gimmick was their playstyle, not particularly their attributes. Zac is a good example. Fantastic champion design. I love his theme, I love the slingshot and bouncy and being able to pick up his own blobs to repair himself. It all makes sense, irrespective of how broken his numbers are or how weak they are. Those can be fine-tuned. If you look at his kit, there's nothing in there that shouldn't be there. Zac doesn't have a bonus effect where if he lands a max range slingshot he gets a shield, or if he uses W while Q is off cooldown then it does true damage, or if he triggers his passive in the middle of his ultimate animation then he sends an entire fleet of F-22s to your house. Nothing like that. Now, having made a few videos about power creep and feature creep, I still stand by my points in those videos. Feature creep and power creep are both inevitable. The longer a game goes on for, the more content they have to produce, and the more content they produce, the higher the bar gets raised since standards go up. Be that as it may, developers do have agency in controlling the rate at which things accelerate. Juggernauts like Mordekaiser, Aatrox, and Set have a lot more things you have to think about than some of the older ones like Udyr, Nasus, and Garen, but they're still bound to the fundamental strengths and weaknesses of Juggernauts: predictable engage, slow attacks, and they're pretty bulky. When you start giving champions properties that break the rules you set for your own game, that's when it starts to become a problem. 5 years ago, all assassins shared a weakness of being mostly single target. They weren't the best at teamfights and so on. But now, assassins have some of the best team fighters in the game because we have Diana, Akali, Yone, and Kiana who have so much AoE burst damage it almost defeats the purpose of having a vanguard to engage. Same goes for skirmishers, they're duelists, specialize in 1v1s, maybe 2v2s, and split pushing. Fiora, Jax, Tryndamere. They suck in teamfights because they're mostly single target and can get focused down really easily. Now you have Viego and Gwen, with Viego stealing abilities to pretty much fill whatever role he wants, and Gwen has crazy AoE damage, long-range projectiles, and she can go untargetable against ranged champions. What even is the point to playing mages for AoE damage or tanks for engage, when slayers and fighters can fill the shoes of literally all 7 roles? With marksmen who can solo 1v9 games like Kai'Sa, Samira, and Akshan, that inherently makes them more superior to traditional marksmen like Twitch, Caitlyn, and Misfortune who desperately need assistance during teamfights. My point is, you are allowed to expand on your ideas and innovate new technical mechanics. In fact, it's highly encouraged to do so. League of Legends has never been more interesting. If all 155 champions had the same kits where Q did damage, E was some sort of crowd control or dash, and W was a buff, this game would look like Pokemon where there are 7 Pidgeys or 7 Pikachus. It gets boring. In totality, Riot Games has done a fantastic job with introducing new champions with wholly individual identities, despite only allowing conventionally 1 passive, 3 basic abilities, and an ultimate, plus all the constraints set around MOBAs. Gwen, Viego, and Akshan, in terms of gameplay, they're really fun. And even though it's a meme at this point, no matter how much I bash on Yone, he's really fun. What I, and I'm sure most of the community is asking for, is that they maintain respect for what already exists and ensure that the new content doesn't completely invalidate old content. So basically, I'm reiterating what I said in my Too Many Champions video, where they need to make sure the new isn't too much more advanced than the old. If Riot wants to embrace the power creep, go right ahead. But rework all the outdated champions so they're all power crept equally, and not put Garen in the same game as Akshan, Gwen, or Aphelios, because at that point, does anyone even want to play Garen anymore? Anyways, I'm gonna stop here because while I love to rant, I also don't like trashing on Riot too much like a blind hater. I try to give them as much benefit of the doubt as possible, and I do acknowledge interesting champion design beyond the scope of their numbers. None of these champions signal doomsday contrary to what the community tries to make you believe, but I'm just exhausted at how every new champion just seems to be an infinitely better version of older champions these days. There are times where I wonder what kind of heroin that company is on, because for them to do the things they do, I mean, it must be some of that good shit, let's be real. But yeah, sorry for making you listen to all this. I saw Scooch's video and I felt compelled to make my own since I've made like dozens of videos about new champions at this point. Let me know what you have to say about these overloaded champions in the comments down below. I'm willing to bet money I'm not the only one who feels this way. I hope. That being said, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like. Don't forget to sub to the channel for more content like this. Consider following me on my socials and joining my Discord server if you'd like. And lastly, check out my previous discussion videos if you haven't yet. But thanks so much for listening to this very long rant, and I'll see you again soon for the next one. Take care.